Sometimes with Donald Trump, you got to start at the end. Start at the end of a federal judge's order. Judge Burrows in Massachusetts siding for the second time in 2 weeks for Harvard against Donald Trump, claiming that finding that there has been retaliation against Harvard for opposing Donald Trump. And therefore, he's retaliating against them by taking away $3 billion in grants. And more importantly, the lifeblood of an international program at Harvard, the foreign students. And Donald Trump issued a proclamation on the 4th of June, just hours after he lost in court on a related issue. He ordered a proclamation that anybody who's trying to come to this country under an F or J visa, meaning you international students, sponsored by Harvard, denied. The judge said no, that is inciting to George Washington's farewell address. She has ruled again against Donald Trump. She said his arguments border on the absurd. We're not absurd. We're here together on Legal AF. I'm Michael Popok. Let's get back to Judge Burrows' decision. And as I said, I want to begin at the end. Here's what she says on the 44th page of her order issued yesterday. Here, the government's misplaced efforts to control a reputable academic institution and squelch diverse viewpoints, seemingly because they are, in some instances, opposed to this administration's own views, threatens these rights. To make matters worse, the government attempts to accomplish this, at least in part, on the backs of international students, with little thought to the consequences to them or ultimately to our own citizens. As George Washington said, if freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to the slaughter. George Washington addressed to the officers of the Army, March 15th, 1783. Therefore, the preliminary injunction is granted. And she also talks about freedom in her conclusion. Judge Burrows says, in favor of Harvard, against the Trump administration, by necessity, this order discusses some abstract legal concepts, but it bears reminding that at its root, this case is about core constitutional rights that must be safeguarded: freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and freedom of speech, each of which is a pillar of a functioning democracy and an essential hedge against authoritarianism. It may be that many of us, having grown up in a culture of free speech and thought, have become complacent, but free speech, particularly in the academic arena, must be zealously defended and not taken for granted. Judge Burrows isn't taking it for granted. We're not taking it for granted here on Legal AF. How did we get here? Well, what I love about Judge Burrows is that despite the fact that in the real world, Harvard apparently is trying to cut a deal with the Trump administration, although in new reporting in the New York Times, that seems to be foundering on the rocks that Harvard doesn't want to look like they're complicit or that they're caving in. Good luck. You either stand and fight or you capitulate. You either appease or you stand and fight. I'm sorry that there's no third way, that there's no middle ground, Harvard. It's like a tennis match. You're either at the net or you're at the baseline. But if you stay in the middle, you're going to get hit with the ball. Stand up for yourself, protect the freedoms of academia, protect free speech, and don't settle. You got a judge who's ruling in your favor. And let's leave it on the doorstep of the United States Supreme Court then and have our fight there. But here's what she says. She takes in her order. She takes all of the attacks by Donald Trump, his own words in Truth Social posts, in social media posts, to completely explode doesn't even pass the straight-faced argument by Trump that, well, they're not related. President Trump attacking Harvard and then several days later issuing a proclamation to deny them the ability to participate in the foreign exchange and international student program, they're not related. The judge said that borders on the absurd. That can't be true. And so she then goes through, let me read to you what she says. She said, it's on page 5, the administration reacted quickly and relentlessly to a letter from Harvard to its community saying that it would stand with them to defend their First Amendment rights. The administration reacted quickly and relentlessly, she wrote. Within hours of President Garber of Harvard's letter denouncing the administration's conduct and demands, the task force under Donald Trump announced a multi-billion-dollar grant funding freeze. By the next day, Trump had joined the conversation, posting on a social media website, Truth Social, quote, Perhaps Harvard should lose its tax-exempt status and be taxed as a political entity if it keeps pushing political, ideological, and terrorist-inspired supporting sickness. Remember, tax-exempt status is totally contingent on acting in the public interest. He followed this on April 16th with a longer Truth Social post aimed at Harvard's views, its faculty, and their views, and presumed political leanings, stating in part, and then she quotes from his posting, Harvard hired from New York Bill D. and Chicago Lori L. at ridiculously high salary fees, two of the worst and most incompetent mayors in the history of our country, to teach municipal management and government. These two radical left fools left behind two cities that will take years to recover from their incompetence and evil. Harvard has been hiring almost all woke, radical left idiots and bird brains who are only capable of teaching failure to students' so-called future leaders. Harvard is a joke, teaches hate and stupidity, should no longer receive federal funds. And the Trump administration has the balls to stand up to the federal judge and say, yeah, he said that. But that's not the proclamation banning them from participating in the foreign exchange program goes to national security, not the animus of Donald Trump against Harvard. And she effectively slapped her forehead and said those two things cannot exist in the same planet. On page 6, she quotes on April 20th, 2025, that Trump took to Truth Social again. Harvard is an anti-Semitic far-left institution, as are numerous others, with students being accepted from all over the world that want to rip our country apart. The place is a liberal mess with anger and hate. Now, since our filings began, they act like they are all American apple pie. Harvard is a threat to democracy. See, sometimes it's hard to figure out whether a policy was animated by animus and hatred, except when you're dealing with Donald Trump, because he puts that exactly in writing that can be used as evidence against him in the case. Same thing on May 5th. She quotes Donald Trump again on page 7, or cites to actually Secretary Linda McMahon, the Department of Education, who's just paraphrasing things that Donald Trump said. So what's going to happen next? Well, Kristi Noem, remember her, Homeland Security? She took and wrote an op-ed piece at the Washington Post, of all places, in which she said that she's going to root out anti-Semitism. See, still flying that false flag of anti-Semitism. You know, while they're supporting Israel with the bombing runs, this is the same narrative. And Harvard needs to go down in flames because they're not vigilant enough against anti-Semitic bed sheets and other First Amendment speech that was going on in their campus during the the Hamas-Israel conflict, and nobody's buying that and nobody's believing it. But they're going to continue to go after Harvard as a national security risk, whereas every federal judge, particularly Judge Burrows, has said this is a First Amendment violation, a Fifth Amendment violation, viewpoint discrimination, and violations of the Administrative Procedures Act, you name it. She threw the kitchen sink at them. There's now 2 separate preliminary injunctions stopping the Trump administration from barring Harvard from participating one way or the other in the international exchange program, which every major university and their competitors does. It's the lifeblood. Let's just be frank here. It's the lifeblood of the finances of these universities. American students, let's be honest, require a lot of student aid. They get grants and loans and student aid. But top dollar without aids is paid by foreign students. That's why schools love them. They let them in. They got to pay the rack rate. And it helps balance their budgets. Sure, Harvard has the largest endowment in America, but they still have to run a university with all of its expenses and research facilities and faculty and housing and student life and libraries and all that. So they need yearly money coming in revenue from tuition. They also want a diverse student body. I mean, one of the freedoms of academia is to be able to pick your own faculty, pick your own students, pick what you're going to teach, and pick other aspects of student life. Those are freedoms that we give to academia, right? In liberal education, liberal is not a 4-letter word. It's not diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's liberal arts. I know Donald Trump probably wants to change the name of it to Make America Great Arts or whatever, but that's where we are. So Harvard, I see it. I see the reporting. You're getting close. You added a Trumper, a right-wing, not radical, but right-wing Republican lawyer to Harvard Corporation's Board of Governors. I see where this is going, but there is no settlement that will not be seen as a total capitulation by Harvard, even if in the details you think you're getting one over on the Trump administration because you're smarter than he is, and I'm sure you are. Don't settle. I'm Michael Popok. You're on Legal AF. We'll continue to follow it all. Hit the subscribe button as we continue our drive to 700,000 subscribers. Is that what I said? Yeah, 700,000. 700,000 subscribers before this month is over. Until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.